Swayam Prabha. Digital India. Educated India.
Hello student, I am here Professor Smita Jha to elaborate Jane Eyre, one of the most popular fictions of Victorian era with intertextual connections. And I think it will be interesting to know the intertextual aspects of Jane Eyre. Well, the relationship between literary text can be considered a new field of study in literary theory. Text used to be studied and dealt with both separately and internally. Shaking the stability of this critical approach, the French semiotician Julia Kristeva introduced the term intertextuality in the late 60s, that is 1966. Intertextuality is the weaving of one literary text into another, forming a kind of new articulation. The core idea of intertextuality is that all texts are intertext. Each text exists in a vast medium of text with which it should engage in dialogue. Intertextuality is one of the bases and requirements of all communication, since all text and discourses are always built upon existing cultural codes and norms. Texts are therefore instrumental in the construction of other texts. The term intertextuality has been widely accepted by postmodern literary critics and theoreticians. According to Kristeva, readers are always influenced by other texts, especially when writers borrow from previous texts. Their work acquires layers of meaning. The theory of intertextuality has been further extended by Rona Barthes and Jonathan Kuehler, who include the readers as constituent component of intertextuality. Barthes and Refeter view that intertextuality as, under quote, it replaces the challenged author-text relationship with other discourses. According to Barthes, a text is essentially concerned with its position within the work. As a methodological field from work to text, and deals with the limits and demarcations of the discursive field. In spite of the divergent theoretical positions in which the text is held, its significance remains considerable, as the text is the location for the play of multiple meanings of the elements that constitute textuality. In addition, when a text is read in the light of another text, all the assumptions and effects of other texts give a new meaning and influence the way of interpreting the original text. It shapes the text meaning by another text. Julia Kristeva says that text is not only product of author and its environment, but it is created by using another existing text. Theorists of intertextuality problematize the status of authorship, believing that texts are constructed more by their intertextuality than by their authors. For them, texts provide context within which other texts can be created and interpreted. The term intertextuality denotes the kind of relationship that has been discussed here. J.A. Cuden summarizes her claims that a literary text is not an isolated phenomenon, but is made up of a mosaic of quotations, and that any text is the absorption and transformation of another, but not connected with the study of sources. Kristeva is not merely pointing to the way texts echo each other, but the way that discourses or sign systems are transposed into one another, so that meanings in one kind of discourse are overlaid with meanings from another kind of discourse. She thus employs the term to describe an inescapable property of all text and all signifying system. Kristeva postulated a literary system which acts like a collective mind that writers unconsciously draw on. Any literary text will be related to any other, not merely through direct quotation or indirect allusion, but inescapably as a subliminal presence that is part of the very notion of literature. The term is encountered often these days in literary discussions. However, it has come to be applied to a whole range of notions from sources, influences, and deliberate allusion to chance resemblance. Whatever one thinks of Kristeva's version, it should be noted that she does not differentiate between the conscious kinds of reference, allusion, etc., and her own universal intertextuality. She ignores the former and indeed cannot account for it authorial agency being ruled out. The nebulousness of Kristeva's concept would not lend itself easily to the semantic web. Jane Eyre is replete with allusions to other texts. There are intertextual references to Richardson Pamela, which is also a hypertext to Jane Eyre, plus allusions to quotation from Shakespeare, Milton, the Bible, Byron, Wordsworth, Scott, and many others, and also to conduct guides, evangelical tracts, phrenology manuals, and the chemistry treatise of Humphrey Davy. Bronte quotes from the written text of Bewick's Birds, but also perform transmodal transformation, that is between different media, of the illustrations therein. This transformation is that of ekphrasis, that is the depiction in the word of a picture. The intertextuality of Jane Eyre is not merely formal decoration. Jane, as narrator, is in dialogue with the Bible and Milton, rereading these texts in order to rediscover in them original truth regarding the sanctity of authentic companionate marriage that have been distorted by false citation. In her enforced solitariness, Jane herself is an intertextual reader, making parallels between the domestic tyranny she endures and the tyranny recounted in Goldsmith's History of Rome. Kristeva is the producer of the intertextual theory, where Saussurian theory of science and Bakhthian theory of polyphonic are used to combine a literary text to various interpretations and voices. Kristeva believes that any text is a rewriting of another text. She states it by saying that there are no text but intertext, She considers the text as a surface with many intersections with other surfaces from another text. Let us take the comparative analysis of Wide Sargasso Sea by the author Jean Rai and Jane Eyre by the author Charlotte Bronte to argue the concept of intertextuality. Wide Sargasso Sea is written as a prequel to Jane Eyre and narrates the backstory of the character Bartha from Jane Eyre. Wide Sargasso Sea is a hypertext of Jane Eyre. It is written in a different era and is a kind of response to Bronte's novel. The Wide Sargasso Sea is much celebrated novel of Rai's, published in 1966. This text marks the re-entry of her into the limelight of literary fame. For her, it was an attempt at bridging two cultures and two genders. The title denotes the gap, the wide expanse of ideological conflict that separates the world of woman from that of man, the sea of convention that cannot be crossed easily. It also denotes the expanse of unresolved conflict of the colonial and the post-colonial conditions. It won the Royal Society of Literature Award and the W.H. Smith Award for that year. Jean Rais was made a Fellow of the Royal Society of Literature in 1966 and CBE in 1978. A Smile Please, her unfinished autobiography, was published after her death in 1979. The opening of Rais' novel is set a short while after the 1834 emancipation of the slaves in British-owned Jamaica. Antoniette conveys the story of her life from childhood to her arranged marriage to an unnamed Englishman that refers to Mr. Rochester from Jane Eyre. As the novel and their relationship progress, Antoniette, whom her husband renames Bartha, descends into madness. It tells the story of Antoniette Causeway, a white girl who grows up in the Caribbean and who has a disastrous arranged marriage and goes mad, imprisoned in an English country house. This novel is the previously untold story of Bartha Meshon, the first Mrs. Rochester in Bronte's Jane Eyre, although she is given a different name. The Wide Sargasso Sea sets out to answer the question of why Bartha Mason, Antoniette Causeway, might have gone mad in the first place. The novel uses Jane Eyre as an imaginative straight point, a starting point, but the point of view is changed from the first-person narrative of Jane to that of Bartha Mason. Rais emphasizes the omission and corrects the exploitative context. She writes the story of Bartha's life as she is not satisfied with the ending of Jane Eyre. Rais enhances the common elements in both novels, such as dreams, the Gothic style, and irony through the characters Bartha and Antoniette. Just like Jane of Bronte, Rai takes the character of Bartha from Jane Eyre and narrates her life story with another name. To begin with, the character Bartha, the first wife of Mr. Rochester, is a character from Jane Eyre and is a minor character. Although the background of Antoniette is narrated in Wide Sargasso Sea, it is important to keep in mind that some characters call Antoniette Bartha. Here, the postmodern device, intertextuality, paves the way to uncover the meaning in the text. Rais begins to narrate the story of Bartha, just like Jane Eyre, from childhood to maturity. This genre is called building Roma. Rice narrates the life story of Antoinette from the childhood of emphasizes her rejection by other people. Antoinette is an ignored child and is devoid of love. But the end of the story is different. Jane gets stronger in time, but Antoinette is very weak in the end. Rice challenges the conventions and make Antoinette defeated by the problem in her life, unlike Jane. She lives isolated, hopelessly with her cultural identity, and is not nurtured in time. Therefore, White Sea Sargasso cannot be called a building Roma like Jane Eyre. The norms are shaken and meanings are scattered. The character in such a condition makes the reader think in a new and different way. It seems absurd to the reader. Although in Jane Eyre, Bartha gains her freedom, by committing suicide, she cannot gain anything but lose her sanity. Another common element in connecting both the characters, that is, Jane and Antoinette, is dreams. We all know that dreams reveal our future hopes and repressed feelings and desires. The dreams reveal the suppressed feelings, fears, desires of the two characters. We get the chance to know their unconscious mind and understand them better. The difference is that Rice does not reveal Antoinette's fate by a dream but leaves it open. She remains as innocent, unlike violent, in Jane Eyre and only dreams of doing such a violent thing. Thus, by using the dream concept, Rice preserves the main structure of the novel and enhances it in her own way. Rochester, husbands of Bartha, in Jane Eyre, plays the major role in both the works, while Bartha has been given minor place in the Charlotte's novel in comparison to Antoniette's place in Wide Sargasso Sea. Through the novel Wide Sargasso Sea, Antoniette is many times called Bartha. For instance, quote, "Then I said sharply, Bartha, are you asleep? Are you ill? And why don't you answer me? Certainly, I will, my dear Bartha, not Bartha tonight." She said, of course, "On this of all nights, you must be Bartha." In addition, Gothicism creates a mysterious atmosphere for both characters. Gothic genre was famous in 19th century when Jane Eyre was written. In Jane Eyre, Bronte uses a ghost and supernatural events to create a spooky atmosphere with a dark, gloomy setting, Thornfield. By not giving so much detail about Rochester's marriage to Bartha, Bronte leaves some mystery to the reader. Rice also borrows this element for her novel, Wide Sargasso Sea. The novel is full of supernatural and magical Caribbean beliefs, such as the love poison that Antoinette wants. Both of the protagonists, mother, suffer from madness, and the worries and fears they suffer from also create a very gloomy atmosphere. Moreover, in White Sargasso Sea, Rice has references from the events, feelings, experiences, and locations from her own life story and reflects it with Antoinette, which is called a structural irony. She wants to tell the reader that being an outcast is a very difficult experience. She creates another ironical tone with situational irony by developing unexpected experiences Bronte must have had, among strong feelings about the West Indies, because she brings the West Indies into a lot of her books, like Villette. The West Indies were rich and very much more talked about than they are now. So, Zorais takes the character of Mr. Rochester's first wife, Bartha, who has a secondary role and a minor character in the novel, and makes a major character in the wide Sargasso Sea. She creates a backstory for this major character named Antoinette, who is sometimes called Bartha by other characters in the novel. Antoinette and her husband are the same characters in Jane Eyre, who are known as Bartha and Rochester. In the wide Sargasso Sea, Antoinette is called Bartha several times without any pre information about this name. Rice also changes the setting from England to Jamaica. She did her job well by using Jane Eyre as an intertext of her novel, which becomes a major source of significance for her, The White Sargasso Sea. Victorian writers also confronted issues like poverty and depression. Charles Dickens introduced the life of poor and depressed people of public in his words like Oliver Twist and David Copperfield. He sketched the pictures of hunger and thirst. Charlotte did it in Jane Eyre, while Emily Bronte in Wuthering Heights. Rice created such type of atmosphere in Antoinette's family, she shows, then financially damaged and mentally disturbed. Naipaul finds the sense of disorder and says that an order has collapsed, and Antoinette's imprisonment by her husband diseased her life. The novel's setting reminds the previous setting of Jane Eyre, where Bartha Mason had set fire in the house of Thornfield Hall, indicating contemporary patriarchal convention. Howell's remark, Rice shows her heroine trying to construct an identity in radically unstable situations where tradition and social convention prescribe certain rituals but are emptied of meaning. So, Rice, by giving voice to the women characters who occupy subhuman levels of existence in the hegemonic narratives in Jane Eyre, has tried to challenge the contemporary cultural conception. Jane overcomes the difficulties and achieves her goal, while Antoinette cannot surmount the problems. Although both of them always longed for freedom and independence, Antoinette never achieves her freedom. She lives in isolation with fragile sense and cultural identity. The difficulties of life defeat her. Jane gets some kind of maturity from her childhood to adulthood. But Antoinette does not get any maturity as she grows up. Rice has given her own identity and voice to identically lost character. Bartha in Bronte's text as Sandra Gilbert and Susan Goober in their critical work, The Mad Woman in the Attic, the woman author and the 19th century literary imagination speak about an inside story in the apparently confirming narratives of women authors. These texts present a woman's story on close analysis, but a very different one from what is apparently stated. They mention the presence in the 19th century woman authors' works of an untold story. Authors like Jane Austen, Mary Shelley, and the Bronte sisters, George Eliot, display a recurrent character pattern in their works, where one could perceive vaguely developed, complex, subhuman women characters, powerful enough to destroy the conventional edifices and magnificent structures like Thornfield Hall in Jane Eyre, and threaten the authoritative representations of male characters whom patriarchy has been relentlessly nourishing and cherishing. These extraordinary women characters with shady levels of existence, are represented as mad women hovering on the attics of magnificent mansions, far from the word of ordinary men and women, beyond the rational realm of masculine logic. Gilbert and Goober state, as we explore 19th century literature, we will find that this mad woman emerges over and over again from the mirrors women authors hold up to both their own natures and to their own visions of nature. Even the most apparently conservative and decorous woman author obsessively create independent characters who seek to destroy all patriarchal structures, which both their authors and their author submissive heroines seem to accept as inevitable. Here, Gilbert and Goober mean that the misrepresentation of women in literature brings in the need for rereading of the great canonical works. They express also the male version of truth and reality, though the deviant representation of women in literary text is not restricted to male authored ones. Rise in her White Sargasso Sea presents a paradoxical mix of dependence on a pretext and aesthetic originality and independence. At the same time, it fills the gap within Jane Eyre by employing intertextual strategies that point out to a particular process of reading. Edward Said states, in reading a text, one must open it out both to what went into it and what its another author excluded. Rai has said in a letter that when she read about Bartha Mason in Jane Eyre, she thought, quote, that's only one side, the English side. She expanded this in an interview. The mad first wife in Jane Eyre has always interested me. I was convinced Charlotte Bronte must have had something against the West Indies and I was angry about it, unquote. Otherwise, why did she take a West Indian for the horrible lunatic, for that really dreadful creature? In this way, it became clear that Rye's parodies Bronte's novel dominated perspective of female and colonial writing. Spivak contends that Rye's work, rather than giving a voice to other, actually reinforces the notion of the supremacy of Western tradition and criticizes Rye's view of Western supremacy. She claims, we can read this as having been brought into the England of Bronte's novel. This cardboard house, a book between cardboard covers where I walk at night, is not England. This study discusses the White Sargasso's intertextual relationship to Jane Eyre as a revision, rewriting, and examines the post-colonial racial foundation. Rye's novel is a parodic intertext of Bronte's Jane Eyre. Her novel shares a fascinating intertextual influence of the character, source, and so on with Bronte's text, Jane Eyre. Both of these novels stand in opposition for the purpose and depiction of theme, style, and motives for the writing. The present study is based on the same shared issues and interconnectedness with both of them. One might also look at post-colonial theory, discussing intertextuality, and dealing with works like Jane Eyre and the White Sargasso Sea. Post-colonial studies are in-depth examination of the various relationships between dominant and subjugated cultures, races, and ethnic groups. It means postdoctoral writing investigate microscopic issues of consideration of other margin like race, religion, economic status, resulting in counter-discursive narrative. Bronte's novel reflects history from a colonial perspective, where, as Rye's novel reframes, that history from a post colonial perspective. While the colonial text endeavors to suppress those belonging to a different class and race by excluding and marginalizing them, the post colonial text emerges from the voices of those who were originally deprived and silent. In the White Sargasso Sea, Rye gives voice to the Creole woman and provides the perspective of the other by telling Jen's story in different racial contexts by translating the Victorian woman's feminist struggle to a West Indian context. Thus, this study discusses Rye's novel Intertextual relationship to Bronte's novel as a revision, rewriting, and examines the post-colonial racial foundation which prompts the rewriting of Bronte's novel. To sum up, we stated the intertextual elements in the novels Jane Eyre and Wild Sargasso Sea. The intertextual elements are the subjects of the two novels, the concept of dreams, Gothic atmosphere, and irony. Rye writes White Sargasso Sea as a response to Jane Eyre by uncovering the story of Bertha and giving her a voice. The author sheds light on the unspoken, with borrowing several aspects from Jane Eyre to create such an atmosphere. The use of these aspects are crucial to the postmodern characteristics and make reader think. In the end, we accept Kristeva's theory that there is no originality in literature, that there are no text but intertext. With this, I wrap up the discussion. Thank you very much. Let us meet in other discussion with another novel. Thank you.